The silence inside the cabin was absolute, broken only by the distant low thrum of recycled air through rusted vents. He sat still in the pilot's seat, arms resting on the chair's cracked armrests, eyes locked on the blackness outside the viewport. No blinking lights, no warning beacons, just the endless dark between stars. They wouldn't see him. He'd made sure of that. The ship wasn't military, at least not anymore. It was a junk hauler from the outer colonies, stripped down to bare metal, heat-masking paint flaking off its hull like old skin. No identifying signals, no trace emissions. If you looked at it through a scanner, it might as well have been a rock. That was the point. He leaned forward, reaching out with a gloved hand, and flicked 3 switches in sequence. The lights stayed off, power routed to weapons, silent, dead until triggered. He didn't speak. There was no crew, just him. Always had been. His name was buried deep in black files no one read anymore. Even the military had disowned him, officially dead, lost during the fall of Vega 9. But he'd survived. Alone, half-burned, starved, forgotten. He didn't care about medals or justice anymore. He cared about the ones who did this to them, to all of them. And now they were coming. The alien fleet was cutting across Sector 6 at half-light. An entire armada, 3 dreadnoughts, 14 cruisers, over 50 fighter squads in escort, enough to glass a planet in under an hour. They weren't here to negotiate, and they weren't here for him. That was their mistake. He watched the screen without blinking as sensor ghosts flickered in. The bastards were spread wide, confident, not even trying to mask their emissions. Why would they? To them, humans were scattered, broken, weak. Just another dying race on their way out of history. He grinned just a little, not joy, not pride, just that quiet, bitter satisfaction that came before a kill. They thought he was dead. But he'd been preparing. Each weapon on his ship was scavenged, modified, illegal, plasma destabilizers from the red docks, gravity pulse warheads from the pirate fracture, a cloaked micro-fusion drive wired so tight it could slip through a blockade's thermal net like breath through cloth. It wasn't pretty. It was brutal, just like him. And beneath it all, buried in the navigation stack, sat the core. A hacked alien drive interface he'd stolen off a dead Zareth commander. That part wasn't human. That part gave him the edge. His ship didn't look like a threat. It didn't act like one. It didn't even show up on their command grid. Until it was too late. He tapped the trigger array, loading targets manually. There'd be no auto-lock, no guidance, just skill, timing, and everything he'd learned over the years since the Vega massacre. He zoomed in. The lead cruiser was drifting slightly ahead of the rest, arrogant in its bulk. Too confident. He whispered, "That's where it starts." Then he launched. The first warhead didn't show up on their scanners, not even a flicker. It was slow, dumb, wrapped in shielding too primitive for alien tech to recognize as a weapon. It drifted, quiet, passive, until it was directly underneath their fuel line. He detonated it. There was no explosion. Not at first. Just silence. Then a light, too bright for even the vacuum to hide, flared under the cruiser's midsection. A second later, the entire ship cracked open like a rotten seed. No alarms, no shields, just destruction. Panic followed, but not fast enough. Their sensors scrambled. They couldn't trace the source. He was already gone, moving through the dark with engines so cold they barely left a ghost trail. The second ship turned to scan, but their field was pointed the wrong way. He was already behind them. And then came the second blast. It took 10 minutes for the fleet to realize something was hunting them. 10 minutes too late. By the time they adjusted formation, 3 cruisers were gone, 2 more crippled, and their dreadnoughts were spinning wild, confused, unable to track what was hitting them. He said nothing. He just kept moving, one step ahead. They weren't prepared, because their scanners didn't even register the threat in time. He didn't wait to admire the wreckage. That wasn't why he was here. The third target had already been locked in before the second cruiser even exploded. He weaved between broken hull fragments like a ghost slipping through shadows. No nav AI, no drones, just instincts drilled in trenches, corridors, and zero-G firefights no map ever recorded. The alien dreadnoughts had finally broken formation. They pulled back, tightening their flanks and deploying fighter wings in a standard sector-wide net. It was textbook fleet defense against conventional enemies. But he wasn't in a war fleet. He was one man in a coffin-shaped junker, built to disappear. Their scanners reached, swept, pinged. But they were blind. Their tech expected electromagnetic noise, radiation signatures, engine flare. His ship gave them nothing. It moved like it was dead. Lifeless, it didn't ping back because it didn't exist in the spectrum they understood. That was the trick. Humans adapted. These alien bastards? They relied on superiority, on systems, on certainty. They never learned how to fight what they couldn't see. They never fought someone who didn't care about dying. The fighters fanned out, sleek and silver, like mechanical insects with serrated wings. He counted them. 24 in the nearest cloud, banking outwards to encircle a dead zone his last strike created. Too wide of a gap in their coverage, too exposed. He didn't need to punch through. He just needed a crack. He dove. Through floating debris from his last kill, past spinning metal torn open by pressure differentials and ignited plasma. The fighters zipped past above, not even blinking, as if the death zone couldn't possibly hold anything worth tracking. Not a single pilot suspected a ghost in the wreckage. They didn't know who they were dealing with. He reached into the console, flipped the internal limiter off. A warning light flickered, flashing a dull red that read, "Engine core stability critical." He ignored it. Numbers meant nothing if they didn't bleed. This wasn't a long war. This was his war. The core whined, the kind of low, sick growl that came before a beast lunged. He routed power straight into the impulse thrusters, not for speed, but for precision. He punched the manual controls. No nav system, just reflexes and memories of 1,000 dogfights. His ship angled like a knife through buttered glass. No arc, no drift, just a direct cut through space that no autopilot would dare attempt. The frame groaned, but it held. He came up under the last dreadnought, silent as death. Its underbelly was a cathedral of ports and sensor dishes, communications towers, heat exhausts, weak points, if you knew what to look for. He didn't fire. Not yet. He slid in closer, practically scraping the hull, the ship's nose barely 10 meters from the exterior maintenance plates. His ship's camouflage code was hardwired with alien signal bleed, hacked years ago from a patrol vessel he gutted in orbit over Darun Prime. It mimicked the dreadnought's own systems. To them, he was just background noise. They still hadn't seen him. He pulled the trigger. 4 small warheads jettisoned silently. No engine trail. They drifted like garbage, until their soft impact against the dreadnought's surface triggered the magnetic latches. They stuck. They didn't detonate. Not yet. He slid away, pulling back into the shadow cast by the ship's own bulk. And waited. The warheads weren't bombs, not in the traditional sense. They were breachers, spiked fusion penetrators meant to dig through external armor and rupture internal atmosphere pressure seals. But not all at once. First one activated, releasing a sonic pulse that echoed across the hull like a scream underwater. Then a second. The dreadnought's shields flared, too late. The third charge exploded internally. Not a flash, not a blaze. A hole opened, and everything near it vented into space. Crew, equipment, fire. Silence followed it all. By the time the bridge noticed the breach, a full quarter of the dreadnought's underbelly was gone, and that was when he triggered the fourth warhead. The command array went offline in one deafening flash. Then chaos. The dreadnought's escorts scrambled, hailing each other in panic. Formation shattered. Fighters began searching in tighter patterns, now erratic and aggressive. They still didn't know what they were hunting. He drifted back into the debris field, using the broken hulls of dead cruisers as cover. This was how you hunted monsters. You let them bleed first. You made them fear shadows before showing your face. He docked in a dead cruiser's vent shaft. The hull breach he entered through was still glowing faintly from his earlier strike. He clambered out of the cockpit into cold silence. His boots clanked against steel as he stepped into the wreck. The inside was carnage. Burned consoles, twisted corridors, blackened control nodes. The scent of scorched insulation still lingered even in vacuum. No bodies. They'd all been vaporized or sucked out. But he wasn't here to admire the mess. He reached a sealed data port near the bridge, knelt, and jacked in a cable from his suit. The interface blinked. Language incomprehensible to most. But not to him. He didn't need to read it. He just needed the signal paths. He uploaded a spike virus, custom-built to piggyback on internal comms, and broadcast a false location, somewhere behind their fleet. A human distress signal. Low-grade, desperate. Just believable enough. The moment the beacon went live, 2 of the alien cruisers peeled off from formation, rushing toward the phantom signal, just as planned. Now their flank was open. He smiled. They still didn't know it was him. He returned to the ship, slid into the seat, and rerouted power to the magnetic rails along the belly of the hull. Attached beneath it were 6 canisters, homemade spike drones built for close-range hull penetration. Crude, ugly, but brutally effective. He didn't launch them. He rode them in. He slipped beneath a command cruiser as it drifted off to cover the rear line, right into the dead zone created by his virus. From below, the ship looked massive, elegant, too perfect. He released all 6 drones at once, and they dug in. He waited. 10 seconds later, the first drone drilled into the engineering bay. Screams followed in garbled alien audio, then silence. The second drone punched through the backup core, the third into the oxygen recyclers. The last 3? Into crew quarters. He heard nothing but static, but in his mind, he could hear it all. The panic, the confusion, the desperation as pressure failed and internal fires sparked across every deck. The cruiser went dark from the inside out. One long, agonizing death spiral. Lights off, power gone, shields down, and still, not one ship knew where the attacks were coming from. He looped back, skimming the edge of a gas giant to dump heat. He didn't need to fight, not like they did. He wasn't part of a military. He was the last mistake they would ever make. And then he got cocky. A ping flashed on the console. Too fast, too sudden. He jerked the yoke left, hard, as the flash of an energy pulse scorched past his flank. They'd found him. Not the big ships, not the cruisers. A fighter squad. One of the aggressive wings had circled back through the debris and managed to catch his silhouette against the gas giant's rim. 3 of them were closing fast. No time to vanish, no time to hide. He pulled hard, slamming the throttle forward. His ship groaned, buckling from the stress. But he needed speed. The fighters followed, sleek, agile, faster by every technical standard. He hit the vents, released decoys, old human tech, barely more than flares. But it worked. One of the fighters swerved, sensors overwhelmed. He flipped into a dive, rolling beneath a floating satellite carcass. Two still behind him. He rerouted power to rear shields and punched the micro-thruster boost. The core nearly cracked. Warning screamed across his dash. Overload imminent. Didn't matter. He spun again, dropped 2 charges behind him. Magnetic pulse disruptors stolen from an old battlefield grave. They stuck to one of the fighters like leeches, pulsed once, and then the alien ship blinked out, systems fried. A lifeless missile drifting in space. One left. He pulled into a steep climb, straight up, no tricks. Bait. The alien chased. At the apex, he cut power entirely. Dead stop. No movement. The alien overshot just for a second, but it was enough. He fired. The bolt caught the fighter dead center. It didn't explode. It just vanished, consumed by a fire so precise only ashes remained. Then silence again. He exhaled. Not in relief. Just focus. He was bleeding energy. His ship wouldn't hold much longer. He'd pushed it too far, but it didn't matter. He'd cut through the Armada's heart already. They came expecting conquest. Now they were dying in pieces. He opened the comms, not to broadcast, but to listen. Alien chatter buzzed in, clipped and panicked. They still had no tactical awareness, no coordination. Dreadnoughts screaming orders to destroyed wings. Command crews arguing about phantom signals, accusations, confusion. He'd fractured their order. One man, one ship. He leaned back, watching it unfold. And he knew. They still didn't understand what had happened. They thought it was sabotage, saboteurs, internal betrayal. Some even blamed each other. They'd never suspect a human ghost flying a scrap heap built out of stolen parts and raw vengeance. That was their weakness. Arrogance. The kind that made you blind, even when your scanners worked. He would kill them all, not in one day, not even in one system, but piece by piece, ship by ship, until the stars whispered his name in every command room. They stunned Earth once, but they never scanned for rage, and now it was hunting them. The drift back to dark space was slow, silent, and filled with ghosts. His ship creaked as it cooled, hull scorched, systems hanging by threads. Emergency lights flickered over cracked displays. The air stank of overheating metal, recycled too many times through broken filters. Alarms blinked in orange and red, demanding attention he wouldn't give. He didn't fix anything. He didn't stop. Instead, he sat still, staring out at the empty stretch of space between stars, letting the quiet crawl over him like an old blanket. The adrenaline was gone now. His breathing was steady, heartbeat slow. But the anger never left. It never did. He closed his eyes just for a moment, and the ship faded. The stars blurred, the hum of the engine became wind, and suddenly he was back there, Vega 9, a world once beautiful, once alive. He remembered the sky first, not the one from Earth, no blue dome. Vega's sky was marbled gold, streaked with soft lavender clouds that curled and bent with the slow tilt of the planet's artificial moons. It was like living inside a painting. His wife used to sit on their porch in the evenings, watching it change color as the sun dipped behind the mining hills. Her name was Lena. She had long, dark hair, stubborn eyes, and the kind of laugh that made everything feel warmer, even in the cold outer territories. She believed in humanity's second chance, in the colonies, in the treaties. She believed too much. They both did. That's why they stayed. Even when the warnings came. Even when the first patrol ships vanished. Even when Earth stopped answering. He was planetary security back then. Local command, nothing special. Not a soldier in the formal sense. Just a man who carried a sidearm and responded to disputes between miners and corporate drones. He wasn't trained for war, but war came anyway. The aliens didn't send envoys. They didn't hail for surrender. They arrived at 4:26 a.m., planetary time. The sky turned black first. Not night, but something else. Ships. So many they blocked out the stars. They moved like a tidal wave, perfectly aligned, silent, beautiful in the way a guillotine is beautiful, sharp, clean, final. He was at the station when the bombardment started. Saw the first hit land near the northern colony fields. A beam of blue light from orbit, wide as a highway, cut through the farms like butter. Everything inside that circle was gone. Not vaporized, erased. He ran for home. He didn't get there in time. He found her in the ruins. Half the neighborhood was flattened, craters where houses used to be. He dug through the wreckage with his bare hands until he found the ribbon she used to wear in her hair. The rest? There was no rest. His son had still been in bed. He was 5. He never even got to wake up. The only reason he survived was because of the comm tower. It collapsed around him in the second wave, shielding him from the next pulse strike. He came to 6 hours later, buried under steel and concrete, half deaf and bleeding from a shard in his leg. By the time he crawled out, the aliens were gone. Just like that. They never landed. Never took territory. Never sent a message. They didn't need to. They didn't want conquest. They wanted fear. To teach humans what happened when they stepped too far out into the stars. Vega 9 had been a warning shot. And Earth didn't even flinch. The central governments claimed it was unconfirmed. They never retaliated. Never even publicly acknowledged the loss. Just another distant rock filled with nameless colonists too far from Sol to matter. That was the moment he died. The man who'd believed in peace, in diplomacy, in progress, that man died under Vega's sky, clutching a ribbon soaked in ash. The thing that walked out of that crater? That thing only wanted one thing: vengeance. He didn't return to Earth. What would be the point? He would have disappeared into a report, maybe a prison cell if he said too much. They didn't want survivors. Survivors meant accountability. So he scavenged. He moved from wreck to wreck, digging through the ruins of abandoned stations, selling what little he had, trading favors for parts, information, access. It took him 7 years to build the ship. Every bolt meant something. Every weapon had a name. Every patch of scorched armor carried the memory of someone who'd died under that sky. He didn't speak to people anymore. Didn't trust anyone. Didn't need to. The ship became his body. The war became his breath. And now he was here, floating in the dark between sectors, listening to the garbled transmissions of an Armada in shock, waiting for them to regroup, waiting for them to think they were safe again. Because that's when he would strike again. He stood slowly, bones stiff, and walked toward the back of the cabin where the storage locker was bolted to the wall. Inside were the last things he kept from his old life. Not photos, not weapons, just a data pad. Burnt edges, cracked screen. Still worked. He powered it on and pulled up a single file. A message Lena had sent him years ago before the skies turned black. It wasn't long, just a clip of her and their son sitting on the porch. She waved. The boy smiled. "Come home early tonight," she'd said, brushing the hair out of her eyes. "He wants to see the moons rise with you." He watched it in silence. The pad powered off on its own, battery nearly dead. He put it back in the locker and sealed it. The ship beeped twice. Proximity alert. He returned to the console, eyes sharp again. A scout vessel. Alone. Probably investigating the signal noise from the earlier fight. Stupid. He ran the numbers. Small ship, fast, lightly armored, likely unarmed. Didn't matter. He wasn't letting anyone leave this system alive. He powered up the railgun. The scout never saw it coming. One shot. Clean. The ship folded in half around the impact and disappeared into the void, and with that, he vanished again. No trace, no signature, just the fear he left behind. He drifted once more into dark space, the quiet pulling at his mind like a slow undertow. Somewhere out there, the rest of the Armada was regrouping, building up their defenses, deploying more scouts, preparing for the next wave. They thought they were ready now. They thought they'd adjusted. They still didn't get it. He wasn't part of a military. He wasn't following orders. He was a wound in the galaxy. And he wasn't done bleeding yet. The Armada didn't sleep anymore. He'd taken that from them. They were still out there. Dozens of ships spanning half a sector, weaving in formation like a wounded animal circling its own blood. Every few minutes, another scout ship launched, probing debris fields, asteroid rings, and dead radio channels. He watched them from the black. Not close. Not yet. He wanted to see what fear looked like in a species that once thought itself untouchable. Inside the Dreadnought Command Center, they finally gave him a name. Not a human name, but one in their language, translated loosely to something like the Null Pattern. They didn't understand who or what he was. They just knew something was killing them without setting off alarms, without making a sound, without leaving a trace. Every species in the galactic order had their own word for terror. And now, the humans had gifted them a new one. He monitored their transmissions through a cracked translator rig bolted into his console. It buzzed and whined, constantly needing adjustments. The aliens used tri-frequency encryption, modulating speech across shifting neural tones. But he was fluent now, not in the words, in the fear behind them. Third cruiser lost, same pattern, internal breach, no exterior contact. We've confirmed it's not an automated mine system. No energy trail, no hypersignature. Biological origin is likely. Possible human rogue. He leaned back in his seat and let the transmission roll. His hand hovered over a control switch, twitching slightly. The last time it twitched like that, 3 ships died. He listened. Command has authorized the use of Scorched Zone Protocol. All uninhabited planetary bodies in the sector will be sterilized. He smiled bitterly. They were lashing out now, burning entire moons, wiping out mining colonies, glassing derelict stations, trying to cleanse the shadows. But you can't shoot what you don't see. He could feel their desperation tightening like a noose. They were running out of options. He'd become something they weren't built to fight, a threat beneath their threshold of understanding. He'd studied their species in fragments, a civilization obsessed with perfection, structure, hierarchy, everything automated, everything controlled, predictable. He was none of those things. He didn't strike based on logic. He struck based on feeling, fury, instinct. And that's what made him impossible to track. Every time they ran an analysis on his attacks, the data gave them nothing. It didn't align with known weapons signatures, didn't follow standard military strategies. Because he wasn't a strategist. He was a ghost with a grudge, and he was about to make it worse. A new ship had entered the system. He picked it up on his passive sensors, smaller than the dreadnoughts but more heavily shielded, moving with purpose. An interrogator-class vessel. He'd seen one before. Once. After the fall of Vega, it was the ship that arrived last. After the bombardment, after the slaughter. It didn't come to fight. It came to study, to dissect, to learn. It had hovered over Vega 9's ruins for 2 weeks, scanning remains, scooping up survivors who hadn't died yet. Children, mostly. Miners, too, hurt to run. He'd watched through the haze of pain from under rubble as one of their harvest drones pulled a woman apart by her arms, piece by piece, for data, for research. He recognized the silhouette of the vessel even now, years later. its curved wings, its dozens of blinking sensor spines, like the legs of a spider tracing vibrations across a web. That ship had haunted him longer than the war ever had. And now it was here. He reached forward and touched the console with a strange calm. This one wouldn't go quietly. He pulled the ship toward the ice field that wrapped around the twin moons of Coldris, a region of frozen debris and ancient collisions, the kind of place where light scattered and radar lied. The perfect place to die. He hid between two ice masses the size of skyscrapers, his ship's power output reduced to sub-operational minimums. The air got colder. Systems dimmed. He shut down the heat grid entirely. His breath fogged inside the helmet. His fingers numbed. He didn't care. He watched the interrogator ship approach slowly, scanning in wide arcs. Its drones zipped out, 10 of them, each equipped with microsensors and subspectral sweepers. He watched one drift dangerously close to his hull. He didn't blink. It hovered, then moved on. He exhaled. Once. And then he made his move. He triggered the old kinetic launcher mounted beneath the ship's spine. Primitive tech. Pure metal slugs. No energy signature. The projectile ripped through space silently and hit the closest drone dead center, snapping it in half. He didn't wait. The second shot caught another drone mid-turn. Then a third. The interrogator ship flared instantly, turning toward the source, but he was already firing again. 4 breacher pods detached from his hull, each containing one of his specials, hull crawlers built from scavenged mining bots. They weren't fast. They weren't even that smart. But once they attached, they never let go. The pods landed on the interrogator's underbelly. Explosions rippled across its sensor arrays. Lights failed. Drones screamed static as they panicked and lost signal. Inside the ship, chaos unfolded. He listened in on the screams. Internal breach. Level 4 decks gone. We're losing data cores. Override protocol. Is it him? And that was the moment. They knew. They didn't say a name, but they knew. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a story now. A whispered nightmare passed between command rooms and war councils. The rogue human, the anomaly, the patternless killer. The fear had a face. His. But that changed nothing for them. Because even when you name the monster, you still can't stop it. He launched his final warhead, point blank, into the back engine port of the interrogator. A burst of plasma ignited the core. The ship tried to jump. He saw the prep cycle light up, but it never finished. The drive cracked in half. The ship folded backward, imploding as its own field turned inside out. Gone. He drifted away as the ice field lit up with fragments of alien metal, and just like that, the thing that had dissected his people was dust. He leaned back, breathing heavy. The cold was biting now. His fingertips were shaking. Blood from a burst nose vessel tickled his lip. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Didn't matter. The ship held. Barely. He reached for the comms panel, not to listen, but to speak. He'd never spoken to them before. But now they'd earned it. He patched into their open frequencies. He knew they were listening. The aliens always listened. He spoke slowly, voice rough. You took Vega. You thought no one survived. You thought humans would stay broken. You thought wrong. He paused. Let the silence hit like thunder, then. I'm not here for peace. I'm not here for surrender. I'm here to return the favor. He cut the line. No reply. Just static. But somewhere out there, in every ship, in every command center, in every drone fleet hovering near the stars, they heard him. And for the first time, they understood. This wasn't about resistance. This was personal. This was punishment. He leaned forward again, pulling up the star map. 2 more ships were moving toward the system now, likely reinforcements. It didn't matter. He wasn't done. He wouldn't stop. Not until every alien officer who'd ever issued the order to fire on Vega 9 watched their fleet burn from the inside out. Not until his name made even the stars flinch. The Admiral's voice cracked. He was broadcasting over encrypted channels, but the tremble in his tone wasn't a glitch in the transmission. It was fear, raw and unfamiliar. All remaining squadrons are to regroup. No patrols, no solo flights, no signal broadcasts unless cleared by command. Repeat, the anomaly has claimed another command vessel. The anomaly. That was still what they called him. They couldn't bring themselves to say human. Not now. The transmission ended in silence. He smiled in the dark. The interrogator ship had been their last attempt at understanding. Their last effort to reduce him to data. Now they were out of tools and options. All that remained was superstition and paranoia. They weren't warriors, not really. Not in the way humans had learned to be. They fought for efficiency, for resources, for balance. He fought for the ones they erased. That difference was everything. He monitored their movements from deep within a decaying asteroid shell. His ship wedged into its cracked cavity like a tumor waiting to grow. The interior was lit only by dull emergency lights and the flickering haze of static on his console. 3 dreadnoughts had fallen back behind the primary gas giant. 5 cruisers remained in defensive orbit, forming a paranoid ring around their capital vessel. And the fighters? They were grounded. He'd forced them into a cage of their own making. He hadn't attacked in 4 days. Not a shot fired. Not a breach deployed. And that terrified them more than the killing. Because now they were guessing. They launched drones to sweep empty wrecks. They fired blind into asteroid belts. They wasted fuel and munitions chasing shadows. Meanwhile, he just watched. Not because he was done, but because he wanted to see how they broke. He'd learned long ago, fear isn't just about death. It's about waiting for death. And they were waiting. He leaned forward, replaying an intercepted comm log. Why haven't we caught it? Because it doesn't act like anything we've faced. It doesn't use tactics. No, it does. Just not the kind we trained for. Another voice chimed in, softer, lower, more shaken. It hates us. Yes, he did. Not blindly, not senselessly. Specifically, he hated the officers who gave the orders, the crews who cheered when Vega 9 was glassed, the interrogators who measured screams in decibels, the admirals who called it a successful operation. He didn't want to destroy their ships. He wanted to erase their legacy, one signature at a time. The first to crack was a mid-level cruiser captain named Zuthar. He'd been on the command roster during Vega, had personally overseen the post-strike sterilization protocol. After the interrogator ship vanished, he locked down his cruiser's core systems, isolated from the fleet net, and shut off external communication. He thought it would protect him. It didn't. The captain's cruiser disappeared from the fleet net 8 hours later. No explosion. No debris. Just gone. In reality, the ship was still floating, half-lit and torn open, its hull breached at key intervals. He hadn't needed to destroy it. Just cripple its life support, jam its escape pods, and shut down every door between the bridge and the hangars. Zuthar suffocated with his crew, clawing at sealed bulkheads. He listened to it, didn't enjoy it, but he needed it. He needed them to know that it wasn't over, that nothing about what happened on Vega had been forgiven. And still they kept asking the same question. Why? Because they didn't understand humans, not truly. They thought they did. They studied them, dissected them, evaluated their history. But everything they learned was filtered through a lens of superiority. They saw humans as primitive, emotional, short-lived. But they never grasped the most important part. Humans remember, not just facts or names. They remember pain. Loss doesn't fade in human hearts. It hardens, it sharpens. It grows claws and waits in the dark until the day it tears free and takes everything with it. He stood in the center of his ship's corridor now, armored up and silent, staring down at a modified breacher charge he was prepping for the next strike. This one wasn't for random destruction. This one had a message. He engraved the casing by hand, using a short-blade utility tool. Each line jagged, imperfect, just like the world they shattered. When he was done, the alien characters were clear. Vega remembers. He would place it inside the flagship, and then he would watch the message burn itself into their central command logs before detonation. But to plant it, he had to get aboard. He knew the schedule. Every hour, the command vessel accepted a supply drone from the outer support ship orbiting Caldris Beta. It docked through the lower cargo vent, minimally guarded, scanned only for explosive radiation. He could beat that. He'd done worse with less. He retrofitted a supply capsule using fragments from the dead cruiser, rewired the shell, installed heat sinks, pressure seals, and a low-emission glide core. Cramped, but enough to slip past their net. He loaded the breacher, sealed the capsule, and climbed in. No ceremony, no last words, just the hiss of hydraulic locks and the long silence of space pressing in. He drifted for 9 hours. Every second he was inches from exposure. No shielding, no heat, just darkness and memory. He used the time to think. Not of the fleet, not of tactics, but of Lena, of their son. He saw them in the curve of Vega's sky, in the firelight on their porch, in the sound of his boy laughing with juice on his face. He let that image sit in his chest like iron. It didn't bring peace. It brought purpose. The capsule latched into the flagship's undercarriage with a soft clunk. He waited for the rotation, the intake process. No alarms. They hadn't found him. He popped the hatch, slipped into the crawl space. The inside of the flagship was sterile, too clean, too precise. The air had no scent, the lights too white. Alien architecture was all about order, curves, symmetry, silence. He moved like a shadow through their hallways, past motionless drones and oblivious technicians. His suit mimicked their heat signatures. His boots left no sound. He climbed a service duct and crawled toward the central conduit. 20 meters from the core, he paused. Below him, through the vent, stood a war council. 6 alien officers in command robes, staring at a holomap filled with red markers. They were talking about him. We underestimated human persistence. Their emotion clouds logic. This isn't persistence. This is fixation. It's not just a survivor. It's an executioner. He blinked. An executioner. Number he wasn't giving judgment. He was delivering it. He opened the hatch, dropped the breacher. It landed in the middle of their table. They froze. He didn't speak. He just watched their eyes widen as the engraving lit up in red. Vega remembers. Then he ran. No time for combat. The detonation would be small, localized, meant to cripple their command room, not destroy the ship. But it would send a signal, not just to them, to every listening ship, every coward still hiding in orbit. He had been here. He had looked them in the eyes. And he had walked away. The explosion rocked the vessel. He burst out through the emergency vent shaft and launched a tether to his ship, waiting cloaked in the debris field. The fleet lit up in response. Panic, confusion, orders shouted without structure. Too late. He was already gone. In that moment, across every surviving command post, one word echoed: human. Not anomaly, not pattern. human, and they finally understood. This wasn't a glitch in their scans. It was a man, and he wasn't finished. The fleet stopped running. After the flagship breach, they'd had enough of fear, enough of hiding, enough of losing, and fear turned to rage. They changed formation completely. No more scattered cruisers or lone scout wings. Now they flew together, 28 ships wide in a net formation, layered with overlapping shields, battle stations on every level, comms constantly open. They weren't waiting for the next attack. They were daring it. At the center of this wall sat the Juggernaut, a siege-class dreadnought they'd pulled from deep reserve. 4 times the size of any other vessel in their fleet, wrapped in alloy thicker than orbital bunkers, armed with plasma cannons capable of ripping moons apart. It hadn't seen combat in nearly 100 years. They called it the Answer. And to them, it was. To him, it was just another tomb waiting to be sealed. But he didn't rush in. He studied it for days, cloaked in the gas trails of a shattered comet. Watched their patrol routes, their scanner intervals, their new tactics. They weren't reckless anymore. They'd adapted. That made them more dangerous. It also made them predictable. Because when your strategy is fear of the unknown, you start trying to control everything. And when you control everything, you lock yourself into patterns. And he knew how to break patterns. But this time, it wasn't going to be one man against an armada. Not anymore. Because finally, after years in the dark, a signal reached him. It crackled through his busted comms panel, barely audible, slicing through layers of static and encrypted garbage. But he caught it. A voice. A woman's. Sharp. Steady. Human. Unknown vessel transmitting 0 signature warpath code. You're not the only one left. Repeat, you are not alone. He froze. Not because he didn't believe it, but because he didn't expect to hear another voice that understood. He tapped the comms, hesitating only a moment, then transmitted back on a tight band burst. Vega survivor. Confirmed. Warpath acknowledged. Identity classified. There was a pause. Then, you're the one they talk about. The ghost. The null pattern. He didn't answer that, didn't need to. She continued. We're scattered, but we're out here. Listening. Waiting. But if they've called in the Juggernaut, we don't have time left. He leaned forward, gripping the console. How many are we talking? Enough. She sent coordinates, 6 systems out, a refueling moon in orbit over a dead world, long abandoned after the first wave of alien expansion. No patrols, no presence. It had been left to rot, like most of humanity's early efforts. But it had something the others didn't. A signal tower still online. Buried under dust, hidden by time. She didn't say her name, didn't need to. Only one kind of person would have known how to find a signal tower like that. Only one kind of person would have survived the silence, waiting for a ghost like him to respond. A soldier who never got the order to stand down. He plotted the course and jumped. The warp field snapped around his ship, dragging it through the fabric of space like a blade through skin. The journey tore at the hull. One stabilizer burned out. The nav system crashed mid-jump. Didn't matter. He arrived. The moon was little more than rock and ice. The base was buried so deep it didn't even show up on first scans. But the signal tower was real, and the hangar door opened the moment he broadcast the old Earth military override code, long since purged from most systems. Inside? 2 ships, both human. One was long-range recon, half-patched together with alien tech. The other? A battle corvette, scarred, ugly, but alive, and more importantly, it wasn't empty. She met him just inside the airlock, helmet off, gray-streaked hair pulled back, scars along one jaw, eyes like sharpened iron. Not surprised to see him? not scared. "You're older than I expected," she said. "You're still alive. That's all that matters." She didn't smile. Didn't need to. There were others in the hangar. 5. All in different gear, from different colonies. All quiet. All watching him like he was a myth that finally stepped into the light. He said nothing for a long while. Then, "We take the Juggernaut together." Her head tilted. "You got a plan?" "Not yet," she smirked. "Good. Plans get in the way." They started prepping. 3 hours later, the War Council aboard the alien flagship received a message. A voice, human, clear, director. "We're not anomalies. We're not patterns. We're the part you missed. And we're coming." The signal originated from 6 different systems simultaneously. A ghost broadcast, designed to confuse, designed to remind them. This wasn't just one man anymore. The virus had spread. They tried to shut down external comms. Too late. The Juggernaut repositioned its flanks, triple layering shields, activating its long-range scanners. Still couldn't find them. Then the lights on Deck 3 went out. No explosions. No hull breaches. Just darkness. And one by one, entire subsections of the fleet began to go silent. Not dead. Not destroyed. Just cut off. Isolated. The first attack didn't come from outside. It came from within. Hidden relays inside 2 of the older alien cruisers had been hacked years ago. Hardware viruses buried during salvage ops. Back when humanity was still pretending to play by the rules. Now those relays lit up and turned against their hosts. Entire propulsion grids reversed. Life support rerouted to waste systems. Doors sealed. Cannons aimed at friendly vessels. By the time the command ship reacted, 3 cruisers were already firing on each other in confusion. The Juggernaut finally powered up its full targeting array. And then, he arrived. Out of the black. No fanfare. Just that same battered junker, moving faster than physics said it should. Every gun in the fleet turned toward him. He let them. Because while they were watching him, they weren't watching the others. The Corvette broke in from below. Silent, masked in the debris of the cruisers he'd turned against them. The recon ship came from the far edge, spinning, spiraling, launching flares and scrap like chaff. And from the planet's surface, the signal tower activated, launching a coordinated jamming wave that tore through the fleet's command net like a blade through bone. Now they couldn't talk. Couldn't call for help. Couldn't even organize. All they could do was scream in static. The Juggernaut fired. A blast of searing light exploded out from its main cannon, wide, hot, violent. His ship took the hit, on purpose. The shields collapsed, the hull cracked, systems blew out in showers of sparks. He ejected just before the reactor ruptured, his escape pod spiraling into the broken flank of a disabled cruiser. And from inside that pod, he launched the final charge. A micro-warp tether locked onto the Juggernaut's core field matrix. The bomb didn't explode like a normal warhead. It folded. Space bent, twisted, and the Juggernaut's own warp core imploded inward, tearing through its frame like a fist through wet paper. No explosion, just silence, and then a vacuum where the most powerful ship in their fleet had once floated. He drifted in space, watching the shock ripple through the others. Half the remaining fleet jumped out. Cowards. The rest surrendered. Not formally, not with documents or flags. They just stopped moving, stopped fighting, stopped believing. He floated there, staring at the wreckage, not satisfied, not vindicated. Just done. And in that moment he realized something. It wasn't about making them fear him. It was about making them remember. Because if they remembered what humans could do when pushed far enough, they'd never forget again. He didn't land with a victory speech. There was no parade, No banners, no crowd. He just stepped off the scorched escape pod, boots crunching against metal plates slick with dust and charred debris, the wind on the ruined moon thin and dry. The others were already waiting near the hangar, those same few who'd stood with him in the dark. No cheers, no applause. They just nodded. They were soldiers, not heroes. Heroes were dead and buried under Vega's soil, burned with no graves, remembered only in the screams of the ships he'd left adrift. The Juggernaut was gone. The Dreadnoughts, gone. Half the fleet scattered to stars unknown. The war, at least this part, was over. But peace didn't come. Because as he stood outside the hangar bay, helmet off, letting the cold air scrape across his face, a sound came through the static. A pulse, not a transmission, not a distress signal, a single deep, resonant tone, vibrating through every system like a hum in the bones. His ship's wreckage, what was left of it, lit up for a moment, not in response, in surrender. Then the signal died. He turned slowly to the woman, the one with the gray-streaked hair and the soldier's spine. She'd heard it too. Everyone had. "What the hell was that?" one of the others muttered. The woman narrowed her eyes, voice low. "That wasn't alien military. That was something else." He nodded. He'd heard it before, not during the war, before Vega, back when he was still in the intelligence division, before the uniform, before the wife, before the child. There'd been whispers, rumors of a signal pattern older than human comms, buried under ancient asteroid fields, locked behind encrypted black site walls. Something deep in the galactic net, never decoded, never claimed. A frequency humans weren't supposed to access. He'd ignored it, dismissed it, like everyone else. But now? Now it was here. Answering back. He went inside the hangar and plugged the fragments of his cracked comm array into the base's auxiliary systems. Ancient hardware. Slow, clunky, analog, but safe. Not connected to anything beyond these walls. The signal repeated again. One tone, then 3 short bursts, then silence, then it began again, over and over. But this time, with each cycle, the base's old mainframe started decrypting it, pulling apart fragments, decoding blocks that had once been untouched for decades. And a message bloomed on the screen, line by glowing line. "The human test has concluded." He froze. The woman stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Test?" The message continued. "Phase 1, survival confirmed. Phase 2, retaliation successful. Phase 3, observation complete. Phase 4, integration begins." And then the screen glitched, flickered violently, until a symbol appeared, not human, not alien, something else, a shape with no symmetry, no logic, a pattern that made the eye ache just trying to understand it. And underneath it, "We are returning." He stepped back. For the first time since Vega, since crawling out of that pit of ash and blood, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Dread. The woman stared at him. "Who is we?" He shook his head. "Not who." "What?" They called them the architects, not officially. There was no documentation, no confirmed contact, just fragments, sensor ghosts, ancient ruins, inexplicable tech on derelict planets that didn't match any known species. For centuries, they'd been a mystery, a background myth. Some believed they were the first civilization in the galaxy. Others claimed they were a failed AI collective that ascended beyond physical form. A few whispered darker things, that the architects didn't just build civilizations. They engineered conflict, wars, empires, extinctions, every major galactic collapse, every sudden surge of violent revolution coincided with traces of their signal. No proof, no evidence, just the stench of too much order, followed by perfect chaos. He remembered a briefing from years ago, classified, delivered in a quiet room on Earth's military moon base, far from press and politics. The man delivering it had called the architects the gardeners of entropy, planting seeds of war, watching civilizations bloom, decay, and die, for entertainment, for study, for control. And now, apparently, humanity had passed their test. He slammed a fist into the console, shattering the keypad. They let Vega burn. His voice was raw, not with grief anymore, with clarity. They stood back, watched, maybe even helped the aliens push us. The woman looked at the flickering screen, her jaw set. Why now? Why show themselves? He answered without hesitation. Because we proved something. We showed them what happens when you break us. That night, while the others tried to sleep in the old barracks, he sat outside the hangar, staring up at the stars. He didn't know where they were. Not exactly. The architects didn't need ships. They didn't move in fleets. They didn't invade. They emerged. From data, from thought, from broken systems and fractured networks, like mold in a cracked wall, growing where weakness was exposed. He realized, then, that the war with the alien fleet hadn't been a real war. It was a test environment, a simulation, to see what one human, a broken, half-dead man full of rage, could do when left with nothing but memory and hate. And he'd passed. They'd watched him crawl through fire, watched him kill without hesitation, watched him inspire others to do the same. And now? Now they wanted to integrate. He laughed, a cold, bitter sound that echoed across the rocks. Not happening. He wouldn't be their weapon, wouldn't be their example, wouldn't be their next pet project. But deep in his bones, he knew the choice might not be his anymore. Because the signal wasn't just for him. It had gone out across the entire sector. Every human installation, every old satellite, every half-dead AI core still clinging to life in the outer colonies. They all heard it. And some? Some would answer. Not everyone had held on to their hate like him. Some were hungry. Some wanted power. Some wanted revenge more than they wanted humanity. And the architects would offer it, not with chains, but with invitations. The next day, the woman returned from patrol with news. There's movement in the Osiris system, human ships, 20 at least. He narrowed his eyes. Osiris is dead. No one survived the radiation storms. Not anymore. They're building something. Fast. Too fast. Coordinates? She handed them over. He read the data, paused. This isn't a base. He zoomed in on the layout, the energy signatures. No, this wasn't a base. It was a gate, a multi-tiered wormhole generator, pulsing with an energy signature that didn't match any human technology. And at the center, that same impossible symbol, the one from the message. He exhaled slowly. They're opening a path. For who? She asked. He stared at the screen. Not who. For what comes next. The Osiris gate pulsed like a dying star. From a distance, it looked like a halo, a perfect ring of light suspended above the dead world, drawing in dust, radiation, fragments of rock, and worse. But up close, it was chaos, raw gravity distortion, rips in space bending in on themselves, lightning dancing through vacuum. And at its center, the symbol, the architect mark. It pulsed every 7 seconds, a call, a signal, not just broadcasting, inviting. When he arrived, the sky above the gate was already full. Dozens of human ships, some with stolen alien tech welded to their frames, circled the structure in tight orbits. They weren't hiding. They were waiting. He drifted through the upper atmosphere of Osiris in the recon ship, the only one still flight-worthy after the last battle. The woman sat beside him in silence, eyes locked on the gate. They're not enemy ships, she said. No, he muttered, jaw tight. They're worse. He remembered a man from Earth, an old tactician who once told him, if a soldier survives too long in hell, he starts to enjoy the fire. And that's what he saw now. The men and women aboard those ships weren't survivors. They were converts, a new kind of human, the kind who heard the architect's offer and said yes, because vengeance had turned to worship. They wore symbols on their hulls, modified the architect pattern into crude banners, etched into armor, burned into metal. One ship had no lights, only the phrase, "We remember Vega," carved 100 times across its sides. But this wasn't memory, it was madness. And at the center of it all, on the Osiris Gate's control spire, stood the man in charge. A face from deep files. Once a scientist, a theoretician, presumed dead after Earth's AI ban collapsed in the inner colonies. Now, he called himself the Herald, and he was transmitting, not to them, to the architects. The time has come, the gate is aligned, the failed flesh of old Earth stands ready to evolve. The woman cursed. He's opening it. He's actually doing it. Not if I stop him, the man growled, setting a course, but she reached for his arm. Think. He's not alone. That fleet's not rogue. They believe. Then I'll kill every one of them. And become what? A savior? Or the final executioner? He didn't answer. Because he already knew the truth. He wasn't a hero. He never was. He was just the last piece of a machine built out of rage and ash. And that machine was now being rebuilt by people who no longer saw the difference between justice and annihilation. He landed on the surface of Osiris under cloak. The air was thin, barely breathable. The landscape was cracked and scorched from decades of radiation storms. But the tower still stood, massive, ancient, and unmistakably architect. It hadn't been built. It had grown, like bone, like coral. It pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't sound, more like pressure, a vibration in the chest, in the blood. The closer he got, the harder it was to think. Memories surfaced uninvited. His son's voice, his wife's smile, the sound of fire cracking through wood. Not real. The architects were inside him. Testing. Pushing. He pressed forward, through the inner corridor, guarded by humans with hollow eyes and too wide grins. They didn't stop him. They recognized him. And they wanted him there. He reached the spire just as the herald stepped onto the platform. Above them the gate opened. Not fast, but wide. Inside it there was no space, no stars, just light, and shadows moving inside it. Not ships, forms. The herald raised his hands. We have built the knife, and now the hand comes to claim it. The man drew his weapon, a pulse pistol, old, scratched, reliable. You open that gate, he said, and they won't claim us. They'll rewrite us. The herald turned slowly. His face was stretched thin with ecstasy, like someone staring at God. Then let them. You of all people should understand. You burned the galaxy down over a grave. They just want to make sure we never need graves again. At what cost? Cost? The herald laughed. You already paid it. The only difference is now you can cash in. The gate pulsed again. Something reached out. Not a hand, not a ship. A presence, a pressure. He could feel it in his mind, a question. Will you serve? And for 1 second, he wanted to say yes. Because what came after vengeance? What was left, really? The war was over. The enemy defeated. But the pain hadn't gone. It never would. But then he saw the face of the herald again. The same twisted smile as those who'd bombed Vega from the sky. Not out of hate, not out of duty, but because they could. And suddenly he knew. This gate wasn't an answer. It was a mirror. A mirror held up to humanity, asking, what are you when everything's gone? And he knew what he wanted the answer to be. He fired. The first bolt hit the herald in the throat, the second in the chest, the third through the head. He fell backward into the light, screaming praise as he vanished. The tower screamed, not sound, not vibration, denial. The architects reached out to him again, not with words, but with memory. They showed him his son, alive, smiling. They showed him Vega, unburned. They showed him Lena, arms wide, waiting. He dropped to one knee, pain ripping through his skull. "Join us. You've earned peace." And he said the only thing he had left. "I don't want peace. I want you to feel what we felt." And he jammed the breacher core into the spire's console. A stolen alien virus, rewritten, humanized, angry, the same one he'd used to blind dreadnoughts, now injected into the heart of something far older, far more intelligent. The tower convulsed, the gate shuddered, the light turned black, the presence screamed, and then it ended. The gate folded inward, the sky cracked like glass, and silence fell, real silence, not tactical, not temporary, just quiet. He staggered out of the wreckage, bleeding, burned, barely alive. The woman and the others were waiting near the recon ship. "You shut it," she said. He didn't speak. "They'll come back," he nodded. "Then we'll be ready." She looked at him for a long time. "You could have had anything in there, couldn't you? They would have given you your family back." He turned his face away. "I didn't want an illusion." "Then what did you want?" He looked up at the broken sky. A choice. The architects didn't die. You can't kill ideas, but that day they learned something. Humans don't break the way other species do. You can push them, burn them, starve them, strip them of everything. But the pieces? They don't fall apart. They sharpen. And when they rise again, they don't come back the same. They come back ready. The man who once hunted an Armada disappeared after Osiris. Some say he died in the blast. Some say he became part of something bigger, a network, a warning.